we want to lean into emotion, generating emotion from people, like immediately, like removing the rational and leading more into the emotional, because that's how people very often make a lot of their decisions, and then they try to rationalize why they make their decisions. But I think a lot of times it starts from an emotional place. For instance, there's a new, I don't know if you know, there's a new coffee shop downtown. If you go to their website, they are hardcore about faith. That's going to turn a lot of people off. That's going to make a lot of people suspicious and be like, no, I'm not. Why would I get coffee and faith? I just want coffee. So, but conversely, that's also going to turn some people off. Some people are going like, yes, a business that finally embraces its faith. I like that. Yeah. We almost want, there's an immediate emotional repulsion or attraction. And I think that when we're determining what our purpose is, I think that's something that we want to lean into. The versus is leaning into a negative reaction towards arts, nonprofits, academia. Like, I want the nonprofit sector to be afraid of me disrupting them.
Yeah.
And that is going to put a lot of artists in conflict because they're like, I want the grants and stuff like that, But it's also going to empower some poets. They're like, ooh, maybe there is another way to handle this.
Yeah. Very important. And there's also like I think there's an attraction to, like, between people that like have purpose as well. So I think that like one of the things that I realized that like once you really start pushing yourself in one direction, you realize like,
keep going.
There's not a ton of people that are doing that, right? There's not a ton of people that are so purpose driven that, they're foregoing other opportunities because of the fact that like their purpose kind of drives them in one direction. And I think you start finding community with other purpose-driven like people, and I think that's like kind of in a lot of ways, like it is the thing that Diverses does really intentionally, right? So it's like there is this, hey, we're not going to go for grants, we're not going to go for like these opportunities that are just like handed to us, as opposed to creating opportunities like within kind of its own kind of sector almost in a way, and then people that are signing on to the mission are doing the same. And the more people are growing, almost kind of in the same way that a lot of times like a fan base might be like, if I've been a fan of this artist for 10 years, then I have the luxury of like, I know his first album front to back and his mixtapes before that and things like that. Whereas somebody that's new, they might only have some of the new work kind of committed to memory and like kind of understand like their walk and stuff like that. Whereas like, with something like Diverses, it's like somebody's like, yeah, my first year kind of going to Diverses events and like getting some of like some of the workshops and stuff like that, I was just kind of discovering who I could be as an artist that wasn't dependent on like grants and things like that. And then now my third or fourth year, I've been doing it for 4 years, and I'm just, like we're consistently meeting, and like now we're peers. Now we're like, oh, like I found this opportunity space that's not a grant. It's there's like there's a new coffee shop over here, and because this coffee shop opened up, and that coffee shop, like let's say like Restoration Coffee, right? So like let's say like there's a poet who is all about faith. That only thing they talk about is their faith. Now that poet's like, hey, I just heard about this coffee shop, and I pitched them on allowing me to have an open mic around faith, and I'm selling my book there. So like now you have artists that are kind of restructuring their thinking, and it's because of like maybe how long they've been, working with Diverses or working with the concept behind what Diverses is doing.
So I think once you have the purpose in mind and the people who that purpose aligns with, it changes everything. It changes, if you're, in our case, it changes the programming you offer, the sorts of events that you offer. It changes the vocabulary. Like when you're describing what you're doing to people, the words you use might change. If I'm targeting kids, then the vocab I'm using has to be at a certain register and under. If I go too high, kids aren't going to, pay any attention to it. It's going to affect your color choices. It's going to determine the event that you run. It's going to determine what your website looks like. It's going to determine the next group that you create, what that looks like. So this is why, and if I focus too much on a large group of people, it's hard to individualize that, because you start getting too many people, and people have myriad interests, so you start seeing too general, too sanitized. Whereas if you're like, no, this specific group of people, like imagine, like I wanted to make a poet group for 50-year-old runners. That's going to determine the logo I use. That's going to determine the time that we run. That's going to determine the location. That's going to determine, if we have like food, or like that's going to determine what kind of food we have. All these things start being considered, just because I thought about the one specific person who would attend this.